Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, AK Reads. Today we are going to be reading the book Geronimo Stilton, A Cheese-Colored Camper. Double cheese lasagna. Sylvester slipped the leaf into his pocket. I could tell he was one happy rodent. I chewed my whiskers. I'd be happy, too, if I could find my way back to the camper. And what about Radzikistan? Maybe Sylvester knew how to get there. Radzikistan, he exclaimed when I asked. You're in the middle of the fossil forest. Radzikistan is in the opposite direction. Cheese niblets. I knew grandfather had been driving the wrong way, I groaned. Don't worry, said Sylvester. I can tell you how to get back to your camper. Then I'll give you directions to Radzikistan. It took him half an hour to explain everything. There was a lot to remember. I thought about writing everything down on some leaves, but I didn't want to rip up 10 bushes. I love nature too much. Sylvester shook my paw and said, Goodbye, have a safe trip, he called, heading off. I started down the path. As I walked, I mumbled the directions. Let's see. I take the path for 10 minutes until I reach the beech tree, I began. Or was it an oak tree? Then I turned right 2 or 3 times and crossed the brook. At the brook, I head upstream, or maybe downstream. Then I come to a boulder that's shaped like a cat's head. Or was it a rat's head? Then I cross a small bridge and turn left, then right. No, maybe it was right then left. I tramped through the woods for more than an hour. Rats! I was lost again. Why didn't I write those directions? So what if I destroyed a few bushes? So what if there were fewer leaves in the world? Was that such a crime? I sat down on a rock. Tears sprang to my eyes. How did I get myself in such a mess? I sobbed. It's late, I'm hungry, and I should be in my cozy mouse hole. I should be nibbling on a triple-decker grilled cheese and tomato sandwich right now. Just then I sniffed the air. Was I dreaming? Did I really smell cheese? I sniffed it again. Yes, I was sure of it. It was the scent of double cheese lasagna. I pulled myself back together and got back on the path. I followed the heavy scent. Before long, I saw the twinkling lights of the camper. I squeaked with joy. Home at last. I couldn't tell my family about my adventures. They would be so happy to see me. They must have been worried sick when I didn't return. Inside, I found them all seated at the table. Thea glanced up. Oh, it's just Geronimo. Who? Grandfather asked. Geronimo, Thea repeated. Grandfather William shoved more lasagna in his mouth. Oh, did he go out? He muttered. I sank onto the sofa. Then I told him how I got lost. Then I explained about the lasagna. Followed the scent back to the camper, I said. Tina smiled. She was very proud of her cooking, especially her double cheese lasagna. Speaking of lasagna, I continued. Can you cut me a piece? Now Tina was practically glowing. Nope, it's all gone, she announced triumphantly. She held up an empty pan. Your grandfather even licked the pan clean. So much for his diet, he added. My stomach rumbled in protest. I couldn't believe that my family hadn't saved a single piece of Tina's delicious lasagna for me. I was starving after my midnight ramble through the forest. 5 pounds of cheddar. The next day, we left at dawn. I pointed my grandfather in the right direction. For once, he listened to me. What a shock! Maybe he was feeling sick. I didn't ask. I was just happy to be moving again. Oh, I'm a traveling mouse. Whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm a traveling mouse. Grandfather sang. I grinned. Grandfather's singing sounds like shrieks of a mouse with his tail caught in a trap. We drove farther and farther north. The landscape began to change. Instead of green trees and bushes, there were snow-colored valleys, icy mountains dotted in the horizon. I noticed that the sunlight was getting dimmer and dimmer and dimmer. It seemed that he had left fall behind and headed straight into winter. It wasn't any old winter. It was the coldest winter on the planet. At lunch, we stopped for a break. I put on my thermal underwear, my heavy parka. I put on my cat fur hood, but nothing kept the cold out. The air froze my whiskers. I had to defrost them back inside the camper. We drove and drove, on and on. Weeks went by. Finally, one day, a road sign emerged through the fog. Ratzikistan. Ratzikistan! Cheese niblets! I did it! We're here! Grandfather exclaimed. He pulled over. I must find a supermarket immediately, Tina declared. I stared out into the fog. Something tells me there aren't any supermarkets in Ratzikistan. In case you haven't noticed, we're in the middle of nowhere. Tina snorted. She grabbed her canvases shopping bag. No paper bags for Tina. Then she jumped out of the camper and looked around. Then she began hiking towards a dirty little shop in the corner. Rotting fruit piles of smelly fish filled the shop window. Inside, there were crates and boxes everywhere. What a dump! I peered into one of the crates. It was filled with jelly jars. I picked one up. Little white balls of something floated in the murky liquid. They looked like eyeballs. I gulped. An army of ants crawled out the side of another box. Each ant carried a piece of smelly green cheese. My stomach lurched. Ears of shelled corn on the cob stuck out of a wicker basket. I pulled one out and I shrieked. It was covered with tiny worms. By now, I was feeling faint. Did I tell you I'm afraid of ants? Did I tell you I'm afraid of worms? Did I tell you I'm not crazy about electric toothbrushes either? Oh, but that's another story. I watched Tina march up to the rodent behind the counter. He had a crooked tail and a long smile. She pulled out a long shopping list. I'll need 5 pounds of your best cheddar, 6 jars of your finest sardines, and 3 loaves of your freshest 7-grain bread, she barked. The rodent dropped his crooked smile. His eyes opened wide. Still, he didn't say a word. After all, what could he say? It was clear they didn't have those things in this store. Forget it, Tina, I whispered. I told this is not a regular supermarket. There are no supermarkets in Ratzikistan. Tina stamped her paw. There's one thing you should know about Grandfather's housekeeper. She never takes no for an answer, and I mean never. Once, a waiter told Tina she could not meet the chef at her favorite Italian restaurant, Squigolni's. She threw a fit. First, she threw her napkin in the air. Then, she threw the spaghetti in her air. Then, she threw her waiter in the air. I will not forget it, Tina insisted. She slapped the shopping list on the counter. Give this to your boss, she told Crooked Tail. He disappeared into the back of the shop. A few minutes later, another rodent came. He was carrying all the things Tina had asked for. Tina showed me a smug look. No supermarkets, my paw, she smirked. A cast iron stomach. We climbed back into the camper. Tina put away the food. Soon Grandfather revved up the engine, and we were off again. I stared in the window as we drove along. Icy streams flowed down the tops of gigantic glaciers. Snow-capped mountains dotted the landscape. Thea snapped away with the camera. "This place is like a winter wonderland," she remarked. We drove on into the night. The road grew steeper. We crossed over a narrow bridge. We climbed over a rugged gorge. Patches of ice covered the road. I broke out in a cold sweat. One slip and we would all be goners. We'd be nothing but a camper full of cat food. I felt faint. Oh, why had I come to Radzikistan? It was one big mountain mass. I was afraid of heights. At last, we reached a clearing. It overlooked all the valleys below. Grandfather pulled out. He jumped out of the camper, clapping his paws. "Now this is what I call good, clean air," he squeaked, taking a deep breath. "Someone write this down. We need to tell tourists to stop at this very spot. The view here is more breathtaking than the inside of Cheesy Chew's factory." My sister began typing away on her laptop. She had been taking notes the whole trip to put in our guidebook to Radzikistan. "What would I do without you, my darling granddaughter?" Grandfather beamed. Then he scowled in my direction. "It's a shame you're not like your sister, Geronimo," he added. "It's a wonder you two are related." I decided to take a walk. My tail was flat from sitting in the camper so long. Plus, I needed to stretch my paws a little, get the old blood pumping, get away from Granddad. I took a few steps, but I didn't get that far. Seconds later, Tina's whistle practically pierced that eardrum. She used it to signal that dinner's ready. "Come on, shake a paw. You don't want your food to get cold." We sat down at the table. Tina was busy dishing up the meal. She placed one olive, a piece of lettuce on Granddad's plate. Recently, she had decided he needed to be back on his diet. Granddad stared at his plate and sighed. "No complaining," Tina scolded. "You have to drop those pounds or else we have to roll you home." Then Tina turned her attention to me. Uh-oh, Tina had other plans for me. Recently, she had decided I was too thin. She began piling my plate high with food. I watched in horror as I filled an enormous bowl to the brim with spaghetti. Then she slapped down plates after plates of pie, casseroles, puddings, bread, and more. There was no way I could eat all that food. It was enough for 10 mice, not one. I felt sick. But Tina," I began, "I have a weak stomach. I don't think—" "Nonsense!" Tina interrupted me. "I'll fix that stomach of yours. You just need to be able to fill it with a ton of food. Soon you'll be able to eat stones." I cringed, but I didn't want to tell Tina I was interested in eating stones. I didn't want her to hit the roof. Meanwhile, Grandfather was eyeing my food with envy. He tried to steal a roll, but Tina slapped his paw away. "I'm doing this for your own good," she told Granddad. "As you, Mr. Stilton, you need to try harder." I opened my mouth. Bad idea. Tina picked up a spoon and stuffed my mouth full of lard. "See, that wasn't so bad, was it?" I couldn't answer. "Have you tasted lard? Think glue, only 10 times worse." And that's the end of this chapter of Geronimo Stilton, a cheese-colored camper. I hope you enjoyed. Bye.